All right, well, California's ban on same-sex marriage heading straight to the state Supreme Court just hours from now. The court will hear oral arguments on why Proposition 8, the ban on same-sex marriage, should be overturned. Joining me now is one of the state's biggest supporters of same-sex marriage, San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom. Thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Good morning. Good to be here.
You know, you've really become the face of advocacy for same-sex marriage. Back in 2000, 61% of voters supported Proposition 22, which at the time also sought to ban gay marriage. And then again, this past November, they voted for Prop 8. You know, when you talk about these ballot measures, is the way that California allows this type of voting on various issues needing to be called into question as well?
Well, I mean, the whole history of the rights movement is an interesting history. Rights have been afforded people not because of public opinion polls and not because of the will of the voters. Think back to 1967 when there were 16 states that banned interracial marriage. Over 70% of Americans opposed interracial marriage until the U.S. Supreme Court finally adjudicated that it was unconstitutional. In California, the Supreme Court did exactly the same in May of last year. And as a consequence, Prop 8 was formed. People were upset about that. The question the court's going to be asked this afternoon, or rather this morning, is a simple one. Was Prop 8 appropriate? Was it a simple amendment to the Constitution, or was it a revision of the Constitution? And therein lies the distinction. If it was indeed a revision, a dramatic change to the Constitution, then it required a different process. 2/3 of the California legislature and or a constitutional convention before the voters can determine the fate of a minority. In this case, it was simply a petition and 52% of the vote.
Right, but it also begs a question about these propositions getting on the ballot in your state in general. I mean, aside from this one, this is highly controversial, as we know, and it really split your state pretty much almost 50-50. I mean, this passed by 52%, I think, of the vote. Yeah. What does it say about whether or not that process by which California voters are able to sort of weigh in directly on certain issues and how that affects your legal system?
No, it's a legitimate point. In 2000, it was one thing. But in 2008, it was different because it was the same California Supreme Court that's going to be hearing the arguments this morning that had the opportunity to make that decision whether or not Prop 8 was appropriate to go on the ballot. They deferred on that. And that's why there's a lot of questions about whether or not they're now going to, subsequent to the vote, overturn the quote-unquote will of the voters. So there's a legitimate process argument. There's also hanging the balance back to the human side of this, 18,000 couples that are waiting for their fate to be determined, their friends and families and loved ones. Those are the couples that got married between May and November before the voters overturned the court decision, in essence.
And you know, we have you on, and we know you're a proponent. So I want to ask you about the other side. Supporters of Prop 8 say this. They say Proposition 8 is about preserving marriage. It's not an attack on a gay lifestyle. Proposition 8 doesn't take away any rights or benefits of gay or lesbian domestic partnerships. They make that argument by saying that under California law, domestic partners shall have the same rights, protections, and benefits as married spouses. They say there are no exceptions, and it will not change this. What do you say about that?
Well, I say that I thought we dealt 55 years ago with the notion that separate is not equal. They're arguing that separate is somehow equal. I thought that we had worked through that in the consciousness of people's minds. I don't believe in running the 90-yard dash on equality. I believe a marriage is marriage, and I believe there's a reason they spent $40 million on a word, is they understand that the institution is different and it's superior to civil unions. So the construct is one I just fundamentally don't accept. I believe in full equality for everybody, and I'm very, very concerned that if the will of a majority, a simple majority, can take the rights at any time and place of a minority, then there's nothing to stop a subsequent majority to take away your rights or my rights or someone else's rights based upon religious or ethnic or any other construct, not just the issue of sexual orientation. So there's a profoundly important question here. We're a constitutional democracy, not a pure democracy. Right. And wherein does the Constitution lie in this debate? And
I guess, you know, taking this very thorny issue aside, is it time for your state to rethink propositions in general?
Well, that's a altogether different point because I think there's a lot of folks who disagree. It's getting out of control in the state. Tens of millions. We spent $85 million on Prop 8 on both sides. Right. The most money ever spent on it. It's getting absurd. And you can see these ads. You can't tell which. It's confusing. The whole process, from my perspective, is broken. It begs for a constitutional convention out here in California. We need to revisit this whole system. You're right.
All right, Mayor Gavin Newsom from San Francisco, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I know it's a little early for you guys.
That's all right. Thanks for having me on.